Can I just ask you that very obvious question about time frames? Because clearly President Trump thinks that we can move to a vaccine very quickly, but I know others are tempering expectations at this point, like Moderna. What do you think a realistic timeline looks like for that vaccine being delivered into people's arms?
So, I think we're a bit more realistic than the previous session. We are going to deliver our vaccine second half of next year, so it'll be right at the end of next year, most likely, before it's being used in people. That's based on our experience. We've developed several vaccines. We've been making vaccines for quite a long time, and our experience tells us it'll be another year or so.
Is the current rush that we're hearing expressed by some politicians actually damaging the process or public confidence, you think? Because every time we hear of a very near-term timeline, people begin to get excited and then obviously become disappointed and somewhat disillusioned as that deadline passes.
Yeah, I think there is a danger of that. We, along with other vaccine makers, have come out with a pledge, to stand with science, and that basically means that we want to do everything properly. We want to do it to get a safe and effective vaccine. That's the number one priority. And everyone's working to super compress timelines as it is. So I do think that politicians setting unrealistic expectations could damage the credibility of the vaccines going forward. But ourselves and others have come out and said, we're going to do things properly. We're only going to do things properly.
David, do you question the validity or the efficacy or the actual whole project of Sputnik 5 and indeed what the Chinese are doing? Because the Sputnik 5 apparently is out there already. I'm not quite sure what the rollout of this is like over in Russia. And also the Chinese are talking about a COVID-19 vaccine for November as well. Do you have grave question marks about these projects?
Yeah, I think in our industry, what's most important is data. And that's what you heard Stefan Bancel talking about is, you need to have enough data and then you need to do work in that data. And that takes time in its own right. So what's not clear is how much data there is available on this Sputnik vaccine. And then in terms of the Chinese data, there are Chinese vaccines that, look very good. But, one of them's got missing a control arm, for example. So again, the data that's out there is what's going to be most important. It's hard to know the quality of some of these vaccines without that data.
David, I'd like to say that Jeff and I are in a privileged position because we speak to very smart people like you on a daily basis. And off camera, some people say they're really concerned about the speed to market of these drugs, which would validate the anti-vaxxer movement in some way, shape or form. The problem is, if we don't get this right first time round, a lot of people are just not going to want to have themselves and their families inoculated as well. The anti-vaxxer movement is growing. Do you have concerns about that?
No, well, the anti-vax movement is something that always concerns us. Actually, we have a Lyme vaccine that's in phase 2 studies. We're partnered with Pfizer on that one, and that anti-vaxxer lobby was very damaging to the previous Lyme vaccine that was out there. So it's always uppermost in our mind. And I think some of these newer vaccines, like Moderna's vaccine, like BioNTech, these mRNAs, and some of these adenoviruses, like the Oxford one, those are new technologies. And I think, people are right to be a little careful with how well accepted and how fast those are introduced, because there is not a decade or two of experience and safety data behind those vaccines. And that's where, our vaccine and indeed the GSK Sanofi one and indeed a couple of the Chinese approaches are based on, long proven technologies and approaches. And I think that's why you're seeing some of the approaches being put into people pretty quickly. But with the newer technologies, I think a great deal of care needs to be taken.
Fascinating, David, that you draw that distinction, because I've not heard too many people making that point. So you feel that perhaps we should move a little more slowly around the genetic-based approach?
Yeah, I think so. One of you maybe have heard that a number of them require super cold supply chains. That's because they're not very stable. That very complex, super cold supply chain is going to be expensive. It's going to be complex. It'll be very difficult in some countries. So I think those vaccines are potentially going to have a role. What's not clear is, will they have a leading role or will they fit into a portfolio? And again, I think and I've heard Anthony Fauci say this as well, we believe that there's going to be a need for more than one vaccine and probably more than one vaccine type. So this won't be a winner-takes-all, first past the post. There will need to be a small portfolio of vaccines with different profiles, most likely, and that's going to be the way that we'll address the disease over time.